on it. But if you invest in grassroots, then after the election is over, you've got this engaged group of volunteers who's not only going to help you in politics, but it's going to be the next generation of PTA leaders and school board candidates, and not just engaged in campaigns, but in all kinds of good things for the community. So that's important. We were only able, with President Obama, to accomplish big things like healthcare reform and others because of the volunteers like you all over the United States. And that was the whole reason behind trying to do Organizing for America. We couldn't make changes, policy changes, not elections, policy changes. We couldn't make them if we didn't have the grassroots strong support. So that's why you've been so important, and it was hard to step down as DNC chair because I feel so closely connected to this work. However, I realized a couple of things when Jim Webb made the surprising announcement that he wasn't going to run again. I just have been at this too long in Virginia, and I've seen us move too far that I didn't want to stand on the sidelines and let it slip backward. And this is what I really want to tell you about today. You in this room who worked hard in 08, but many of you in this room have been working hard for a long time. You've been part of an amazing political transition in this state. And I don't want you to forget, you're now used to it, so you might forget about it, but I'm going to give you a history lesson. When I moved here in Virginia in 1984, we were one of the most reliable red states in presidential politics, which meant on the national map, as people looked at us, that's a Republican state. Republican presidential candidates didn't come here because they didn't need to. Democratic presidential candidates didn't come here because why bother? And that meant that all Virginians did not have an opportunity up close and personal to see the people that wanted to be president of the United States. When I got elected governor, I made a vow, and the vow was, I made a series of vows. Here's what I want to do as an executive, here's what I want to do as a legislature, here's what I want to do politically. And the number one political goal was to make Virginia competitive in presidential politics, even more than any election. Make Virginia competitive in presidential politics. Because I knew if you're not competitive, you're not relevant. Nobody pays attention to you. They take you for granted. At that time, in November of 05, I didn't know who was going to be running for president in 2008. I had no idea. But I knew that I wanted to do what I could in my own little way to make Virginia competitive. You know what? We've done it. It's amazing. In the last couple of weeks, I read an article in Politico that talked about, it said, these were the words, in the perennial presidential battleground states of Ohio, Florida, and Virginia. Perennial? Are you kidding me? Nobody had us on their radar screen in Virginia until 2008. But because we were so important in 2008, the margin that President Obama won Virginia in 2008 was almost exactly the national margin. There was not a state that was a better microcosm for the national electorate than Virginia. I knew after that 08 election that we're going to be on everybody's radar screen as a battleground state for the next many years. I don't mean to disappoint some of you. I don't think we're going to be a blue state anytime soon. I think we're going to be a battleground state for a very long time, and then the trends are moving our way, but we're going to be a battleground state. When you're in a battleground state, let me tell you some things that happen. You win some races and you lose some races. We had 4 good years in a row, 05, 06, 07, 08, then we had 2 bad years, 09, 010. That's what happens in battleground states. They're narrow. The margins are narrow. You've got to run the better campaign and be better organized. But here's the other thing that happens in a battleground state. Everybody pays attention to you. This week there was a PPP poll out that showed that President Obama would win Virginia's electoral votes if the election was today. Washington Post poll out this week. President Obama would win Virginia's electoral votes if the election was today. Those were very positive things. But in the analysis in PPP, it said Virginia is now, in many ways, even more important than Ohio and Florida. I mean, can you imagine this? We've gone from irrelevant, we were on nobody's radar screen, candidates didn't come, and now we are the state that many people are saying is the critical battleground state. The reason that Virginia is the critical battleground is we are what, now this is my phrase, not any pollster, we're a checkmate state. President Obama can be president without Virginia. But if President Obama wins Virginia's 13 electoral votes, the other guys, it's hard to put the map together without Virginia for the other guys, right? So that means congratulations. That means you've done amazing work. That means you've taken a state that was on nobody's radar screen to the state that everybody's saying in front and center in 2012, but it also means something else. When the spotlight's on, the pressure's on. When you're at the center of it all, everybody's watching you. When we finally done all this work to move us into this position, You know, and I've lived here 26 years, and my wife and I both have wanted to make Virginia more politically competitive, more socially inclusive, more economically just, and we've seen that happen, but now people are watching, and we really got to produce. If you think we had to work hard, you know, to get to this side, now we really got to work hard to stay there and to justify all the work that we've done to get us to this position. The way that starts is by the work we do in 11 and 12. We have to have a good 11 so that we get some energy and excitement after two tough years in 09 and tough years in 10. We got to have a good 11. And so that means in these legislative races with maps that were drawn, a relatively good map for us in the Senate, not such a good map for us in the House. We've got to hold on to the state Senate. And we've got to show on maps that were drawn to favor the other guys in the House that we can go out and win some races, including some races maybe that they didn't think we could win. We need a shot in the arm this fall. We need to put good people in this fall, people who are going to be partners to work together rather than people who are going to be bashing the president and, you know, and doing all of that. We got to put good partners in. But if we do good work this fall, it's not just about this fall, right? We are the only battleground state in the country that has state elections this fall. Now, New Jersey has state elections, but they're viewed as pretty reliably blue for electoral vote purposes in 2012. Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi have state legislative elections. They're not likely to be battleground states in 2012. But Virginia is a battleground state. We are a key battleground state. So in addition to electing the right people this fall in local elections and in state elections for the legislature, the work we do this fall is the platform. The work we do this fall, whether it's registering people and door-to-door and persuading and helping folks get elected partners, we start to build the platform for success in Virginia in 2012. And I'll tell you something else. When I said that you were a battleground state and in that way you're an example, here's something else. We, all of us who care about the president, we can do some things in Virginia, hopefully, this fall that can be little models, right, little pilot projects. We're not going to win in 2012 if the president's doing exactly what we did in 2008 because the other side learned what we did in 2008. So we got to get better, smarter. We got to do some new things. One way to do new things is to try to do some new things in this little pilot project in Virginia in 2011. Let's try them out. Then let's see if they work. This is good. We can make some changes and upgrades. Things that we do in Virginia in 2011, the national campaign will look at it and think, okay, we want to do it elsewhere in 2012. So I'm really here just to fire you up about what will be a great election cycle, but to tell you that you should feel good about what we've done and how far we've come, but that also carries a responsibility to it. Because now everybody's watching us, and everybody's wondering, will Virginia stay as a key battleground, or will Virginia slip back to where they were from 1964 to 2008? I don't know about you, but I ain't interested in going back. There's nothing about back. So that's, you know, that's what's at stake. I mean, we're here because we care deeply about this country. We believe that this president is the right leader for this country. You know, I don't have to fire you up on that because I know you're talking about this, but I mean,
a lot of people don't believe that he's the right president.
Well, they don't, but we're going to tell them. And here's what we're going to tell them.
Why doesn't he get us out of Iraq?
How about if I do questions after I finish my talk? But let me tell you why this president is the right president. We came in the midst of an economic freefall that we have not seen since the 1930s, with a plummeting stock market, shrinking economy, shrinking GDP, job losses at historic highs. So there were 22 months of job losses in a row, but under this president, there have now been 14 months of job gains in a row. The stock market plummeted and is now growing. And here's something, if you talk to anybody and they say, well, the president's not good for the economy, more Americans are in the stock market today than ever before because of retirement accounts. If you put $1 in the stock market the day that George Bush was elected president, what do you think it was worth when he left office?
70 cents.
You're very close. 78 cents. Over 8 years it went down. You put $1 in the stock market when President Obama was elected, and I sure wish I had. What do you think it's worth today?
$1.70.
About $1.50. So 22% loss on the previous guy, 50% increase. Americans in with retirement accounts jobs growing, GDP growing. We got a long way to go, but this president's turned it around. We got in the middle of two wars in two countries and a global war against terrorism. You've seen the president stop combat operations in Iraq, and yes, there is a need to start and more rapidly bring folks home. The president will start a drawdown of troops in Afghanistan this summer. And something that the other guys couldn't do, which is take out the leadership of Al-Qaeda. This president... Great women on the U.S. Supreme Court, and 4 million more low-income American kids with health insurance, and a health reform bill that provides all kinds of benefits for seniors and small businesses and those who are getting abused by insurance companies, and all kinds of things that this president has done against the most withering opposition who is determined to see him fail from his first day in. Imagine if the other guys had had a little bit of a, well, it's a tough time, we ought to all be trying to work together to do good things. Imagine how much this president could have done with that. He hasn't had it. He's had withering opposition, and yet he's still done things that are going to go in the history books in terms of the magnitude of his accomplishments. But we know it will be tough because the opposition is tough. But look, I feel very comfortable betting on our side. I thought in 2012 I was going to be out on the field for the president and campaigning very hard for Jim Webb. That was my full expectation. I was completely surprised when Senator Webb announced that he would not run in the middle of February. And I had to do a lot of soul searching with my wife and kids about, what was the greater good in terms of our life. But a lot of factors came together, and I decided to run. But I'll tell you, one of the factors was I really believed in my gut. You know what? I think 2012 is going to be a good year to be running. And then I'll open it up and Brent, can I take a couple of questions? I don't want to get too much. So I'll finish and then I'll open up, take a couple of questions, and then I got to roll to a Richmond Young Democrats picnic. But just a couple of things. It is going to be a good year for us. If we use 11 the right way, 12 will be a good year for us. In Virginia and nationally, if we use 11 the right way, 12 will be a good year for us. If we rally to support our candidates, if we do good grassroots work, if we start to get the cobwebs shaken off and come up with some new techniques that we can put into the field in 11 and then learn from them for 12 will be a good year for us. It's not, we don't have to figure out what to do. We know what to do because we've already made history. And again, we can get used to this and then you forget. You can forget once you get used to it. But you have been part of one of the 2 or 3 most historic elections in the 230 years of this nation, right? Not everybody gets to live in historic times, and not everybody gets to participate in an election that's just as historic as the one we participated in 2008. That's pretty cool. But even better than being part of a historic election is being part of a transformative presidency. 2 years in, this presidency is a transformative one. We got to give it the full 8 years to be transformative. And that's
Thank you very much. I want to know what is being done and how we can speak to people who say, yeah, we got the act passed, but they have no teeth.
You mean talk about health care?
And banking.
Yeah, well, okay, well, let's talk about both. So banking is a couple of different things. I mean, obviously, you still see people who are like, the government bailout of banks, what do we get out of it? Well, what we got out of it is first, if people say it was a $750 billion bailout, you tell them, first, passed under President Bush. Second, it didn't cost $750 billion. The latest CBO estimates will say that it was responsible with the stimulus for saving the economy, saving 8.5 million jobs, and the Obama administration has collected all the money back. The cost is ultimately going to be about $20 billion. We've collected the money back. And so the banking sector is now stabilized, not in a free fall. We didn't spend the money out of the account. We've collected it all back. And, that at least stabilized and kept us from a significant depression. So is that the question you're asking?
My personal experience is that the banks are just thumbing their noses at the Financial Reform Act. that they are
Okay, so
not.
you're not talking about targets.
They are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of monitoring of that.
Well, on financial reform, and I gotta say I'm not an expert on it, but much of the Financial Reform Act was to put regulations in place to regulate banks, and a lot of the regs are still being made.
We've got the regs,
Yeah.
but the banks are destroying.
All right, I don't know that I can specifically.
I know
address
that
it.
personally.
Yeah, please.
Governor, one thing I see we have to do is, we've got spending cuts and tax increases
Yeah.
today. And we have to articulate to the American people without apology that taxes are a patriotic duty to this country to move forward, and that you cannot let the Republicans group tax increases on the entire population, but that corporations in America and the wealthy Americans have to start paying their fair share. These are the lowest taxes in decades for this part of the population, and we have to be able to articulate that to win the.
And actually, let me tell you, what I see with voters as I talk to them, but also as I look at polls, my own and others, is that voters get it. If we're going to deal with the deficit, you got to deal with it by cuts and by revenues. You got to both. And that position is much more popular than just cuts. So nobody needs to be afraid of that message. That is voters get that. This week you've seen a lot in the paper, and I've been challenging George Allen on this, about why at a time of we got to deal with the deficit, are we giving these massive taxpayer subsidies to oil companies? The language, if you talk about that, let me tell you this. I think it's important to say we're not against profit. We want businesses to be profitable rather than unprofitable. So that's not what this is about. But in a time of deficit, you don't need to give taxpayer subsidies to hugely profitable businesses. They don't need help. If you're talking about other kinds of cuts that are going to hurt people, you ought to be cutting from those who can very much afford to give it up. Oil companies can afford to give it up. And then I'll come here.
In order to really gain public support throughout the country, why doesn't our president end the Bush-Cheney wars? Because the Iraq war was only done to sustain Halliburton and Bush and Cheney. I did my research and found that Bush Sr. owned 300,000 shares of Halliburton, and I have done a lot more research, and Halliburton had sunk to about $6 a share. It's now about equivalent of 2-for-1 splits. It's back to $80.
So let me tackle that question. I mean, obviously, the president has stopped combat operations in Iraq, which he promised he said from the start this was a mistake. And for all kinds of reasons, it was a mistake. The combat operations have stopped, and now the question is at the pace at which we bring home the Americans there. And that is not an area where I wouldn't know what to tell the president or the military what is the right thing to do there. But combat operations are stopped, and we're not spending the money there or losing the lives that we were, and that's good. The key challenge for us now is on Afghanistan. The president will start the drawdown of American troops in Afghanistan this summer, as he has announced. My hope is that the team looks at the situation in Afghanistan, the fact that we've taken out bin Laden and huge amounts of the leadership of Al-Qaeda. It's not just bin Laden. Over the last 2 years, this president's team has taken out huge chunks of that leadership. That's why we went into Afghanistan. That will give the president and the team the ability, as they're making decisions about the drawdown, hopefully to draw down a lot faster than they would have otherwise.
How about burning out the
actually for one more question.
Okay.
Governor, as former DNC chair, how do we help the Democratic senators and the House stay on message? It seems that
Very tough.
seems that Republicans, they will stay on message if they're trying to sell a suit to a dog.
Yeah.
But from a standpoint of the Democratic Party, they don't seem to stay on message from all the accomplishments. We go through probably one of the most productive Democratic parties in presidential in years, but we still then come back with everything that's been accomplished. Then we come back and say, well, he hasn't gotten folks out of Afghanistan. But look at all the other stuff. He's already said he's gonna get them out, but everybody gets impatient with it.
So everybody hear the question? So let me tackle that question. The funniest thing, but kind of sad but true and funny, that's ever been said about the Democratic Party was said by Will Rogers in the 1920s. I don't believe in organized political parties, that's why I'm a Democrat. And, you know, and it's funny that something that was said in the 1920s is just still kind of has a ring of truth to it. Here is the challenge, but it's also the great part of our party. Let me look around this room. We're the Big Tent. We're the Big Tent in race and demography and national origin and religion and geography and sexual orientation and age and income class. We're the Big Tent. This is not what you necessarily find if you walk into a political meeting on the other side. But something comes with the Big Tent. We're not just Big Tent in who we are, where we come from, what our background is. When you're the Big Tent there, you're also the Big Tent in your views. So the Democratic Party has a huge spectrum of viewpoints that comes naturally with being the Big Tent Party. Now, there are some common things. Dems are very unified and focused on opportunity and equality. That's a Democratic virtue. On investments in education, we all are for those. So there's a few unifiers, but look, we're the Big Tent, and that means that it can be hard to collar everybody. My single greatest frustration as DNC chair was the number of Democrats who ran races stiff-arming the president. I said to him, look, you might win or you might lose, but if you lose, you'll lose worse doing this than just standing up and being proud of who you are. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of who you are. Campaign being proud of our president. He's my friend. I support him. He's doing a great job under tough circumstances. I'm my own guy. We might disagree on some things. I disagree with my wife 1/3 of the time. but we ought to be proud of who we are and proud of our president. And that doesn't mean that we can't disagree and raise questions. Hey, why did the president do this, or could we message better here? I mean, I view that as the kind of thing that is important to kind of get on the table, because we can always be better tomorrow than we are today. But it's important for us in this cycle, 11 and then 12, to look, we're proud of the accomplishments. And you know, what we can say is, we were in deep a ditch in this nation as we've been in for a very long time, and this president, you know, we've had to build our own ladder, and the other guys haven't helped us. We've had to build it ourselves, and we're climbing. Thank goodness we're climbing. We're not where we want to be yet, but I want to keep climbing. I don't want to go back down. And that's what we're doing. We can't say we've solved every problem or solved every anxiety. Too many people are still hurting, and there's too many issues still to solve. And the president is the most impatient of anybody I know in terms of wanting more to get done and impatient about the pace of change. He wants a lot more to be done. But we are climbing again after a decade where we were just falling. We can feel proud of that. We got to keep climbing, and your effort is really key to that. So thank you guys.
All right, so we have a lot of work to do, huh?